What is the truth in the stories we are told? We've been given a story of a world fueled by separation. We've become separate from one another, separate from the earth, ultimately separate from the true nature of ourselves. It's time we learn the truth. It's time you rewrite your story. It's time to realign with who it is that you really are. This is the fifth dimension.
You are infinite and eternal. We are infinite and eternal.
Our natural essence, we could say, is simply being.
We have this awakening coming together as a perfect storm.
We're ready for this. We have the capacity inside. We just got to find that.
All right, everybody, welcome in to the Fifth Dimension podcast. For today's show, I am joined by the one and only Kamya Buch. Kamya, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Oh, absolutely. And I would love to dive right into, hearing about your own background and journey. I know you've been, a nomad and a travel blogger for several years now at this point. But I'd love to hear your own background, however you feel called to share it, but also sort of, how recently and in the past year and a half, where you find yourself now and the sort of evolution or shifts or, just different perspectives that you're embodying now and where you find your mission to be, in the present moment.
Yeah. So I essentially grew up in England. I shifted houses like every year or 2 years. We even lived in America for 2 years when I was a kid. And then when I was in essentially the last 2 years of high school, my parents sent me over to India because they didn't want me to get too into the whole like Western culture. But that ended up really kind of corrupting me because I went to an international school. And those 2 years were the most difficult years of my life. I was prescribed I went down the wrong path, the wrong sort of company, and was prescribed antidepressants, was prescribed heavy pharmaceutical drugs, which then essentially led to a complete breakdown to the point of where I was like, I don't even want to do this anymore. And in 2011, I had a kind of spontaneous awakening experience. And I met essentially, which was a holistic healing clinic in South India, my Guruji. And then I completely kind of dived into a path of discovering all these different things, my meditation practices, the law of attraction, all these different things that have opened up a new world for me, which is, spirituality, personal transformation, etc., etc. And of course, holistic health and healing, which has completely changed my life. And I've never looked back since then. And to the second part of your question, where am I now? When I was in college, I studied economics for 3.5 to 4 years. I pretty much, because I had such a shocking experience and such a traumatic experience as a teenager, I went 180 degrees and flipped on the opposite side, and I didn't talk to anyone, didn't have friends, I didn't consume sugar, I didn't watch TV. I used to wake up at 3 and meditate every day. And after that, then that phase ended, and I was like, okay, whatever I need, whatever I'm searching for, I need to go out in the world and experience things. I'm not gonna, achieve the things I want to achieve in my own personal growth with this whole structure, right? Academia and all this. So that's when in the end of 2015 I came back to India and I started my solo traveling journeys. I started my travel blog and took that up properly in 2017. And these kind of past 4 or 5 years of my life have been ones of rapid transformation, traveling across different lands, reconnecting with my own origins as a Hindu, reconnecting with ancient cultures in different lands like Japan and Peru and Hawaii and Thailand, and all sorts of different types of people, knowledge systems, and really just exploring whatever I can. Entheogenic plant medicines have really had a massive impact in my journey as well. And so I reached a kind of culmination point where I'm like, okay, I had all these experiences. I had all these mind altering experiences. Now, what do I do with it? How do I embody this in the third dimension? And for this time we're on in the planet, where there is a massive shift taking place, where there is a need for people to question the system, and there is a need for us to provide a light to other people to say, you can say no, that you don't need to do the same thing that everyone else is doing in society. And slowly we are, I think, as humans, starting to understand that, we are all like purpose, right? Everything in the universe has a purpose. And so in terms of my specific mission, one is kind of, I feel like, bridging the gap between the East and the West, the way that the East, India, has been colonized for so many years, and assisting people here, creating conscious community, and also kind of helping with the kind of decolonization process that needs to happen from the West by connecting us back with our ancient origins and our ancient roots.
Definitely. No, and you led into exactly what I wanted to ask about next. And in terms of diving into how you've been able to connect with your roots, because that's a process that I've really undertaken myself, because I grew up in a background where I didn't have, my roots of my culture, it almost felt like there was none that was given to me, but I've had to really go into the self-exploration to uncover, who I am on that deeper level. And so, I mean, before I want to talk about colonization too, because you made a beautiful post about that the other day on Instagram, and really empowering. But I would love to hear first about reconnecting with your roots, what that process has looked like and felt like, and what you've discovered about yourself in that process.
I think it's been a continuous evolution and a continuous process of me uncovering the layers of myself, the long-held trauma that I've carried with me since childhood, and understanding that, all the conditions, all the limitations that I put on myself for false, these deep things, I think these very underrated things like forgiveness, self-forgiveness for where I'm at and, what has happened in my life, forgiveness to life itself. That has been a big part of me coming back to, I would say, my origins in a kind of more general way of my organic state of being, right? Without these constructs. My original true light, my true nature, and the trust that I have with myself, the relationship I have with myself, which is strengthened a lot because of solo traveling as well, and definitely because of ancient plant medicines. And also in terms of my own ancestral origin, so I come from a place in India called Gujarat, and so in Hinduism, essentially, we have like these very kind of, it's the oldest civilization arguably in the world, academically the oldest religion in the world. And so all these kind of systems, the Vedic culture actually, that are there, from Ayurveda to yoga to pranayama. Now that's just the tip of the surface. Then there's like all these different lineages, these different traditions and systems that I have been able to experience by traveling in India and visiting these ancient sites where sometimes, the energy has just blown me away, where I have had so many transformative experiences just by being in a location where yogis have done sadhana for thousands of years, where, the energy, the traditions, the rituals are going on since we don't even know how long they've been going on for. Right. So for me to experience that has really kind of, knowing also in terms of the socio-political issues that we face as a civilization for our survival, understanding that, the way that we can make something survive is that we embody it ourselves, that we reclaim the knowledge, and whilst, the kind of New Age community has given me a lot, and I've been exposed to a lot of beautiful things. I do believe that there is this kind of need that we are all born into the lands, the bodies, the situations that we're born into for a reason. And so by me understanding my lineage and the traditional methods of everything from farming practices to medicinal practices, which happened for me a long time ago, it's been a kind of journey of essentially, in that sense, reclaiming the knowledge that is in my DNA and reactivating it in this time.
Absolutely. And I relate to a lot of what you're saying because I come from, my roots are very much Celtic in origin, but I also have a lot of Native American, within America. And I recently moved a few months back to South Dakota in the United States. And there's a very sacred land to the natives here. And I've felt that connection within myself. And it's almost been like an awakening to a deeper truth that already existed and was sort of like waiting to be activated just by sitting and being with the land and feeling that sacredness. It's like, oh my gosh, like this is unbelievable. Like, where has this been my whole life? I'm like, and so it's been a continual process of self-discovery. And I feel that this like connection to these sacred, like deep practices, it feels like that's where the solution lies. And I mean, I would love to hear your thoughts on that, but also sort of how it feels like this, what you've been talking about colonization a lot and, decolonization. And that's where sort of the answer is. It feels like ever since we've gone into this, there's aspects of globalism that I find interesting in the sense that it can bring up, like, I love the idea of global interconnectivity. Like we are all one. Like how can we can use like technology and to bring that about. And there's positives and negatives in each thing. But it feels like, as we've introduced like Western medicine and we've introduced the global food chains and all of these sort of centralized forces across the globe, it feels as if we've never been closer to a point of extinction. We've never been closer to our own demise in a lot of ways. And I would love to hear your thoughts on that and how just sort of where you stand on all of that, because I know you have very strong feelings about that.
Yeah, absolutely. If we look at the history of the world, if we look at ancient civilizations, everyone, like from the ancient Kemetic civilization to the Mayas, the Incas, the Vedic civilization, there have been across all the regions, many parallels, many similarities, and I think in the essence, in these ancient civilizations, the knowledge was derived directly from spirit, directly from nature. An understanding of the natural forces that govern not just this third dimensional material realm, but the connection that we have across all different realms. And and so that then stems down to the kind of the science of our entire existence as human beings on the planet. Now, because of colonization, what happened with the kind of whole modern, what we know now is Western science that has emerged, what modern Abrahamic religion, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. Now, I'm not against anyone's personal faiths, but we know that together Christianity and Islam have invaded and colonized multiple countries across the world, where there are now 50 plus countries that follow Sharia law, which in my opinion is very oppressive and backwards, where, we're seeing extremes of that in certain countries where women can't even show their face. So, there has to be an understanding that whilst no one's faith is bad per se, that there was a time when these regions, Mesoamerica, right? There was no Christianity there. It was ancient and native. Same with Native America and Mesopotamia. There was no, control system. It was a pagan, shamanic, like so many different diverse communities and traditions. And in our side of the world, India, which was once known as Akhand Bharat, Bharat is actually the correct term for India, and across Cambodia, Vietnam, Indonesia, Philippines, all these places. And if you look, Bali today is a Hindu island. that history spanned so many thousands of years. And today what we're left with, at least in India, is a tiny portion which is also continuously under attack. And so as someone that belongs to the last ancient civilization that has managed to survive invasion, I feel a strong sense of responsibility to proactively share this message and help people become aware that indigenous cultures are the last bridge between us and the takeover of the planet. Because what happens? What is this? What's happening in front of us right now, this manifestation of spiritual warfare, is the artificial versus the organic, the disconnect of human beings from their natural origins. The artificial control systems which have told people that you're going to go to hell, if you do this, that have ripped people away from their sovereignty for understanding that there is a system, there are multiple systems for you to experience and embody and understand the God within, to understand that this whole journey that is of spiritual awakening and not of dependency on any sort of really external system, whether that is the Western science or the education system. And so I think for me that kind of summarizes my thoughts on colonization and the need to decolonize. Because ultimately anything in the universe, I think, has power if you give it power. The moment that I say I'm not going to consume fast fashion, I'm not going to consume fast food, I am not going to take this aspirin, I'm going to self-educate myself about natural medicine, and I'm going to come back to my organic way of being. I don't care how hard it is, I am going to make this change. And I think each person that makes that small change of de-addicting themselves from this artificial narcissistic lifestyle is making an impact. And for me, that is decolonization.
So beautifully stated. And it completely resonates. We have fear-based systems, fear-based education, fear-based science, fear-based religion, which goes completely against the nature of spirit, to live in like a perpetual state of fear and division. Like, how out of touch with spirit is that? Like, so, and I definitely feel that same way. Like the call for me and my own purpose and my own mission. And I come from a teaching background. I work with kids, and my mission has been into that almost complete detachment from the dependencies that were conditioned within myself to this system. And it's certainly not easy to uncover, to do all of this. Like, we don't even realize how much of our lives are like centered around this artificial way of life, and especially when everything around you is built on that as well. It's very difficult to completely detach, but that process, just the awareness and that process and the commitment to it, you're already taking your power, which has been outsourced, and you're bringing it within yourself. I don't think people recognize the power that we hold as divine sovereign beings, because we've been outsourcing it for centuries upon centuries. And it's, I'd say, thousands of years in these sort of Western material confines. And what is this detachment, you'd say, look like for you? What has this been like in terms of detaching from the system? And do you find there to be certain challenges or things that I guess awareness is of, wow, this is more difficult than I thought, and how it continues to, you find new layers upon new layers just when you think you've detached from something? It's like, shit, there was a blind spot. Oh my gosh, how does that look like for you?
Yeah, it's really interesting, because I feel like the modern world is now selling us these types of kind of agendas or paradigms or realities which look like they're appealing and look like decolonization, where we're having this like social activism around now BIPOC people versus this whole issue of white supremacy. Now a lot of these things are being used against us for a political agenda. And then we look at things like veganism, where we're like, okay, we know that dairy industry is extremely cruel and inhumane, but then that's also being used for an agenda to get people to take these artificial lab grown meats. And agendas happen over time. They have done decades of research into psychological manipulation. And so the masses that are not sovereign, that don't have the strength of their intuition and do not engage in spiritual practice and are very much suppressed, it's easy to get carried into these things and not question for ourselves what is the truth. I think that's what it comes down to for me, is what is the truth. And so, for example, I'll give you an example. For me recently, one thing that I've been working on myself in terms of detaching from the system has been my food, right? Like, so for example, I always tend to ask when I'm in a cafe or restaurant, where does this milk come from? Where does this cheese come from, right? Now, I think up till a couple years ago, I didn't really used to do that much. Now, just yesterday, and a few weeks before that, I visited a Goshala, which is Go means Go Mata is mother cow, translated in English. We worship cows. She contains all the gods and goddesses, all the different forms of consciousness in the universe are contained within the cow. And the cow is a symbol of unconditional devotion and love. The cow was very much, worshipped and loved by Sri Krishna. The stories of Radha Krishna and Vrindavan, which is where Sri Krishna essentially spent time, is such a magical place. And there still is parts, Tulsi One, which is almost over 6,000 years old, where you can't go after sunset because people either go blind, deaf, or they go crazy. The animals leave the location on their own because they say that what happens is Radha Krishna are doing their leela, they're doing their dance, and because that is so powerful, right? It's like it's like almost like electricity is too strong to go through the thing, right? That people cannot process it, right? And so even there, the trees are intertwined like this, and they stay green the whole year without anything.
Wow.
And so there are a lot of kind of mysteries, and you're like, this is real. This isn't just mythology. And so cows were very much, and so Vrindavan is home to many Goshalas. And I visited a Goshala yesterday where they are engaging in the proper Vedic principles of the regenerative farming practices. So the cow dung goes into the fields. The fields also have these little worms and the seeds, not the whole kind of non-GMO thing as well, right? You have to really, understand this. Also, the farming practices, many of them are artificial, even if it's organic certified. Like, what is it really? What is it really? And so I visited that place and I saw the way that they understand how to care for the cows. The calf feeds, and then the rest is taken for human consumption. And then from that, the Ayurvedic medicines that are derived from different breeds, different forms of processing, right? And I was like, okay, if I want to consume products, right, I only want to consume very authentic products in my tradition, which I know that have, this proper understanding. And where is my economic flow going? Just because I'm seeing an advert on Instagram that says, oh, this nice herbal organic shampoo or soap, I don't fucking know what is actually going on and where I'm giving my money to. So being aware of the I think the kind of the impact, right? The entire cycle of flow, because money is a big part of the system. So that for me has been a big one. The same thing goes with clothes. In terms of any clothes that I want to buy, I try and buy them as far as possible. Very natural materials that I know are kind of as close as the source as possible. And so that's a lot what decolonization looks like for me, at least on the surface. And then we have all these things like what's essential in my opinion and in my experience has been some sort of spiritual practice. So when we actually consciously engage inner practice that resonates with them, definitely a basic meditation practice, because without this we are always going to be stuck in the mind. We're always going to be stuck in the influences of the outside world and never step into the realm of awareness. And I think that's what shifts, is awareness, is when we shift our consciousness, and we give ourselves the space to allow spirit to come through and wash the system out of us on its own.
Absolutely. I resonate with that completely, about conscious consuming and food, then also the importance of the spiritual practice. I've noticed for me, I've been meditating for a few years now, and really engaged in breath work, but recently it's evolved more in the sense like now I'm asking like spirit, what can I offer? What can I give as an offering to you, spirit, to source, that will allow me to give to the rest of the world and help other people detach? And as I've been asking that and making it my focal point, again, it's like a whole new level of evolution in this sense, and being connected to spirit. And it's truly beautiful in that sense. And what would a spiritual practice, like what does that look like for you each day? Like how do you go about connecting with spirit and really being present and allowing spirit to guide you through, as opposed to maybe being consumed by the external world and allowing that to, create your reality?
I love what you just said there. I think that like in terms of us like not functioning as much from the egoic self-concept structure, but understanding that truly everything is an offering to spirit. And in that sense, when we make everything an offering, because really like that also comes to me is like, oh, I'm not doing anything, I can't do anything, he does everything. So for me, definitely that aspect of surrender is something that I have to really work on a daily basis, and something that I indeed struggle with a lot. How do I just surrender to the universe? When something has gone wrong or I'm frustrated, how do I just be like, see that there is a divine alignment in everything. There's a divine timing in everything. In terms of my own spiritual practice, of course, a basic kind of meditation practice. When I'm traveling, it kind of gets a bit hectic to, maintain a disciplined timing and routine. And then some form of pranayama. So I tend to do some basic anulom vilom, which is the kind of alternate nostril breathing, which balances the right and left hemispheres of the brain and really helps me to clear my mind. And then I also have my Guruji now. In the past kind of like 2 years, he's been doing Zoom sessions. He teaches kriyas, from different scriptures, like the Das Mahavidyas. So Das Mahavidyas is the 10 different embodiments of divine feminine knowledge, starting from the most primordial energy of Kali, Tara, and going all the way into Lakshmi, and all these different forms of the divine feminine. And so, these, and he's actually a tantric, so not neo-tantra, but he's actually a tantric. And even though I've known him for 10 years, I am barely scratching the surface in terms of what there is to learn, and if I want to really learn this what we call vidya properly, I will have to take a proper initiation and truly like devote a big part of my time. So right now, my focus, really a lot of my spiritual focus, is on the material world, right? While I'm still in this age, I want to do things in the world. Karmyo, I want to make an impact. I want to raise finances and raise capital so I can make an impact and support, my family and my community and the planet. And then we'll see as we go along, I can devote a lot more time in, learning Sanskrit properly, understanding things. And I'm, at the end of the day, I think I kind of just leave it up to the universe as to where I'm taken.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I'm at a similar place. Where you can continue if you're about to add on to that.
I forgot to say as well, one thing that makes up a big part of my, I wouldn't really call it a practice, but just generally plant medicines, right? So like, for example, different types of plant medicines, say, for example, cacao, blue lotus, and different things. Microdosing has had a big impact on me earlier on. So these are also something that I would consider a part of my practice.
No, definitely. And I'm in the same boat in the sense that there's almost a detachment from the need for a rigid, structured spiritual practice, because it almost kind of goes against what spirituality is about and letting it flow. But, plant medicines has been a big part of my own journey, whether it be microdosing or using hape or just finding different medicines, and they sort of almost come into your life when you need them.
Yeah.
They just sort of flow in. It's like, oh, she legit. I didn't know about that, but here it is sitting in front of me. Let's engage with this.
I have to show you something. So I have this Shilajit, which is called Diamond City Elixir. And actually, my friend makes it. It contains a diamond, gold powder, Egyptian blue lotus, valerian, tulsi, rose, different ashtavarga, which is 8 forms of Himalayan herbs, a ghee, and honey.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so yogis take this. This is he's in the like Vajrayana Tantra lineage, and he's like the yogis, the monks in the monastery. They have this, and they don't have any food, and then they just do their practices.
Wow, that's amazing. No, it's such a powerful medicine. I mean, I just finished with. I had it from this company Symbiotica. They're based in California in the U.S. and I've been using that for the last couple of weeks, and like it had been probably at least a year since I had used it prior to that. And I'm like blown away by how much it, like the profoundness of the last few weeks since I've started taking it and using it. And it's unbelievable medicine. But, and it's beautiful to allow like spirit to bring in plant medicines, to allow us to, I used to be very rigid in the sense I need to meditate right when I wake up. I need to do breath work. I need to do this. I need to do that. And it's like, yes, there's a time to have that structure to really get yourself into it, I suppose. But you get to a point where it's like, I know I'm going to find the time for meditation today, but it doesn't need to be at this second. I'm just going to flow. I feel good. I feel connected, like regardless. And so
definitely like phases and, like different waves. Yeah.
Right. And just allowing it to sort of flow in and be conscious and be present. And, if anything, I think it kind of speaks to like true spirituality to me. What I'm realizing, it's almost just pure freedom in this, like the purest sense. Like, and I know that word is like thrown around a lot. Like people love freedom, like here in America, like, I'm in South Dakota. People wear shirts that say freedom. And I'm like, well, how do we unpack freedom? Like that is a deeply profound word if you think about it, because right. And people very much, even where I am now, there's a level of like tolerance and openness, and like people are not, they're very respectful of all, I would say, opinions and ways of life. But there's still a lot of dependencies and attachments to the system and to the material world and to the television and to, what the president is saying on TV and all of these different like ideas. But it feels to me like true spirituality is like pure freedom. And I would love to hear what your thoughts are on how it resonates and like finding freedom within yourself and what that's looked like.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, at the end of the day, like most of these spiritual traditions and cultures go back to the same place, that of liberation from the cycle of birth and death, liberation from the fluctuations of the mind, to realize ourselves as pure consciousness. Also, the state of which we call Samadhi. So in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, he's mentioned the different steps, dhyan, dharana, samadhi, etc., asana, pranayam, yam, niyam, all of that. And then beyond that, there are different types of samadhi. And so many yogis have, have charted that out. So that's where I get a lot of my understanding from. And also, the ultimate aim being moksha, in terms of pure liberation. Complete freedom from, not in terms of disassociation with the material plane, but where we are truly the masters of our consciousness, where we have liberated our consciousness from this like back and forth of duality, and this cycle of this cycling of things, right? I mean, even in the kind of modern world, and modern science has shown in so many ways that we create our own reality, that our consciousness can shift matter. And so for me, a lot of that, the freedom kind of, not just in terms of understanding that we can manifest things or we can heal our body, and but also the kind of deeper question of how do we really just come back to ourselves? That I think that's what I feel like, which I haven't yet nowhere close to achieved, but but I know that's where I want to go. Yeah.
Right. No, definitely. Like that, coming back to ourselves in the purest form. Like it's interesting because I feel like I elevate more every day to the sense that I'm coming home, but it's like I'm only here now. Like, how much further does this go? And it's almost infinite in its nature. I don't know if we're ever gonna like, to a degree, like obviously we'll go down the path and we will explore deep feelings of liberation and continue that. But how far it goes, it's infinite. And I think that in itself is the freedom. It's the exploration of the path. And, it's, right. I resonated earlier of something you said about when you were talking about what you like way earlier. I don't even remember when this was, but you were talking about being like wanting to bring about change in the material world. I think that, a lot of times when people, there's like a conception of spirituality being like the monk in the mountains and completely detaching from society, and like there's a space for that, and like we need solitude. Like solitude should be celebrated, but I feel the same way as you, in that like pure freedom for me does feel like bringing about change in the material world, because we are spiritual beings, but we are also physical beings, like which in a sense we're just dynamic. We're truly powerful because we're both. So it's like, how do we bring about liberation within both of those planes? And that feels like the age-old question right now. That feels like what it is we need to be striving for. And escaping the duality of it. I even had the realization myself that like, if I'm feeling hopeful about the world, like let's say I'm feeling optimistic about what's to come. Oh, I'm creating a story of hope. I'm projecting a story. If I'm hopeless, if it's hopelessness, like I'm living in fear, I'm pessimistic, that's also a story. Like it's just two sides of the same energy. It's like, can I just be present and allow what is and go with the flow of that? Allow what is. And it's, I don't need to project a story onto it. How can I just be present and go with the flow as it is and find that liberation and allow my, I would say, unconditional love, the being that I am, to create the reality, because we are divine creators. And it feels to me like more people are awakening to that. I mean, would you agree with that in a sense? Part of me worries I might just be in an echo chamber of people who are going down the same road, and maybe, and because there is a lot of darkness in the world, don't get me wrong, that shadow is really manifesting. But if we look at duality, that much darkness also has to create an equal amount of light. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Like where this path is taking us and how many people are engaging within it?
Yeah, I mean, I think for sure there is an awakening happening in terms of many different, segments or layers, right? In terms of people simply questioning their reality, and people say, more people starting to, let's just take a very kind of material world thing where, I've spoken to quite a few people on the ground, and it seems that in India, many people experience the whole work from home thing. And many people are now thinking that they want to buy property somewhere else, want to quit their job, they want to start a cafe in the mountains. A lot of people, the digital nomad thing is definitely growing. The desire that people have to exit this oppressive structure in some way, I think is definitely there. And then that, I think, definitely comes with the questioning of there has to be more than this to this reality. There has to be something else. And I think for a lot of people, that kind of puts them in the space where they're questioning, they're inquiring about these things like healing and spirituality, and going down this path. And we know just generally as an industry, you know, the whole kind of personal growth, and in many ways spirituality has, I believe, been corrupted for commercial interests, you know, is growing financially as an industry. So I think that just speaks to the interest that people have now, the growing interest in what is life, you know, what is reality, who am I, like these pertinent questions that we were never taught to ask in school, because we were always chained to the material world. And I really love what you share there about, you know, the fact that, you know, there's the dark side, there's the light side, but the presence, you know, the presence of just isness is really, I think, you know, the more that we can kind of embrace and accept that and just kind of allow, right, be in a space of allowance, allows life to flow on its own.
Right. And it's like you mentioned earlier, like that's a surrender in a lot of ways, just surrendering to life. Which I will say from experience, surrendering is the most difficult and disciplined spiritual practice you can have. Like it sounds so simple, like, oh, I'm just going to surrender. Like, are you going to surrender? Or are you going to let your conditions like prevent this surrendering from happening and create an attachment? It's such a very difficult spiritual practice, but I do agree with you. And I think there's a lot of people asking those deeper questions, and that I see myself, like I recognize when I started asking those questions, that was the beginning of my own spiritual like practice, right? Or a growth, or even, you know, I think it was when I was probably 12 or 13 years old, I recognized almost the illusion that was this whole system and world. It's like, because my dad told me a story about a coworker who had a college-age son, and he had just graduated college, and he committed suicide because he left one little note, and it said, I can't imagine living in this 9-to-5 world, like living in this type of society. And I don't know why my dad told me that story at that time. But it's left such an impression in me that I had always sort of been unconsciously seeking an alternative. And eventually that came to me the journey took off. But for many years, I struggled to see if I could fit within it. And it was not an option. I realized it would never work. And I empathized. I was like, I understand. If in his shoes, I would have done that same thing, because the system itself is such a fallacy, such an illusion. And I think more and more people are recognizing that. And, I think it leads into this idea of the new earth. And it's interesting because a lot of times it gets intertwined with, like you brought up, new age spirituality, and there's certain things that it has taught me as well, but there's a lot of corruption within that, and a lot of and there's a big difference between new earth and new age. And I'd love to hear on what you feel like the new earth is, because it feels to me it's an inevitability, because people like you, people like myself, we're already sort of planting the seeds for it.
We're creating it.
Yeah.
And I think that each person is an individual point of creation. The more people that are collectively manifesting this new earth with their minds, in itself is creating these shifts, in addition to any sort of organic processes that we may go through. Now here we have this understanding of yugas. So cycles. So Satyug, right now we are in Kali, which is like the dark ages. And within the Yug, there are also, mini cycles. So, I don't know the very specific calculations, but it's quite apparent that everything in nature does go through these cyclic sort of movements. And so, so this, like you say, I believe it is inevitable, that the natural, the spirit, life force, the Shakti, always wins, always comes through, because this is everything. This is creation. And I feel the more people that come back to their organic state of being, we are creating the new earth by, I think, it paradoxically kind of like coming back to ourselves. And so as much as, even in, say, like the political sphere, there is a lot of, an idea that, we have to do a lot of external activism to do these things. And I've, 100% believe that external activism is necessary. But for me, that is really, over the period of time, I've really come to kind of integrate that more than the external, it's really just our own internal activism. The way that we disconnect from all of this and start to come, whatever that looks like for each person, it's going to look like a bit different in different ways, but ultimately heading back to the same place. And so already we're seeing that the kind of new earth is being created, people setting up conscious communities. But it's going to be, I think it's going to be a long process.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. A long process, a lot of growing pains, ripping off a lot of Band-Aids. It's going to be a lot of, pain that has to be felt, because in a sense, I feel like the new earth is finally looking at the trauma at a collective level, each individual feeling and healing and, allowing what has been suppressed, what has been hidden within the shadows to be shown to us so we can feel it and come to a greater understanding, because, without pain, we're never like, that's one of the greatest spiritual teachers there is.
Oh yeah.
And so it's a lot to bring up that about, we just have to be willing to feel that and like face that darkness and find that inner strength and that inner power. And I loved what you said about activism in the sense in the external world, because I think true activism is internally driven. There's a lot of people who, and it's tough because there's you can hear the word social justice warriors thrown around, and particularly on the left. And I know you have some beef with them for sure. I love your tweets about them. But what I'd say is that I feel like their intentions are in the right place, and that's why I feel empathy for them. But it's like driven, they're allowing an external force to drive the activism instead of like
manipulated, easily susceptible to manipulation.
Right. And instead of like a natural activism arising from their hearts and coming to an understanding within themselves and recognizing injustice based on their own moral guidance systems and the way of nature that's within all of us, they see a cause that invokes an emotion, and it gives them purpose to allow this external force to drive them. And that's been the like what quote unquote activism is. And it like I said, I have sympathy and empathy because I recognize that the intention was there, yet there's that key component missing of the own like self-generated like activism, the self-generated from the heart. And it's tough. I don't know if you wanted to speak on that more. I know you've dive into that quite a bit, and if there's solutions to kind of recognize when our activism maybe is externally motivated. I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
That's definitely something I've been conflicted about within myself as I've gone through this journey over the past 2 years, diving into all these different rabbit holes, understanding the political scenarios, not just in this country, but other countries, uncovering so many lies, so many things that make you really angry. And you want to wake people up and you want people to know. And then oftentimes I think it's about, I'm still kind of finding my balance with that. There are people that really do dedicate every ounce of their energy to, speaking up, or this whole social justice thing has now become kind of like a brand. But, I think for me, it's been about understanding that, okay, I have to really refine, these are the specific issues that I will address. I am here for this reason on the earth. This is the message that I have to share that is unique to me. And, I have to share it. So So like from that perspective, I'm still in the process of becoming more aligned and doing that in the most effective way, where like you mentioned, it's coming from a place of constructive, positive change. I think it's very easy to slip into the negative aspect because if you look at Twitter, right, you open it, everything is politics and this and that, and
Yep.
and it's like almost like then that drains your energy. It sucks you into a loop of constantly seeing what's wrong with the world, instead of us turning that and transmuting that inwards and be like, this is what we need to shift. And I think sometimes it's necessary to look at the darkness and call things out. And this is also shadow work, but the finding that balance, right? And like you mentioned earlier, it's like we can get too much in the kind of love and life floaty bubble, or we can be like too much in the kind of like, oh my god, all these things are happening. And like finding that equilibrium, I think, is so essential in these times where even like people that have been in this spiritual realm for many years are struggling. People are struggling with depression, with dealing with the heavy energy of what's going on, and then having this burden on your shoulders that that we need to save humanity. And one thing that I realized, I think it comes through for me is a kind of integration, is that I think I wrote once that you don't save Sanatan Dharma saves you. Sanatan Dharma is like the original meaning of Hinduism, which means eternal way of life, very loosely translated, in harmony with one's own spirit and the cosmic spirit. And so, that these systems are there for us to save ourselves. That as much as we think we can save the world, that we can save people, that we can save the planet, we are the ones that we need saving. That we have to liberate ourselves. And so whilst, yes, there's no excuse, like if we've been given a responsibility to create a positive change in the world, like whether that's helping people become more eco-friendly and not litter, or whether that is starting a kind of brand that helps people with natural clothing, or educating people about things, right? So these are all very, in my opinion, very positive forms of activism. But ultimately, so everything isn't, I don't want to be spiritually bypass everything, but the world is an illusion. It's an illusion, We think that we're doing these things and these things are happening, but what is it really? It's a hologram. And so that really came through for me. And so as much as this kind of like, these all these different conflicting realities where yes, we are right now stepping up and saving the world in different forms of activism. How can we do that in the best way? How can we show up in the most positive way? And then also this understanding is that we can't do anything. That we have to change ourselves. That the nature is going to save us. We don't save nature. The spiritual, we don't save, the spiritual systems save us, which then becomes has to become a regenerative cycle. So we really fully revive and embody that consciousness on the planet.
Absolutely. Beautifully stated. And, I feel like all of our systems, external, everything that we create in like the external world and the material world, it's all just a macrocosm of the individual state of awareness for the majority of beings. So if the majority of individuals save themselves, then naturally it's going to reflect in the outer world, in the external world. So that's why it is important to really make like ourselves the number one priority, not in the selfish sense that we spiritually bypass everything happening at the collective level. And it's like, not even going to concern myself. I don't care. I only need my own spirituality and my own growth. And it's like, okay, I get it. There's some truth in that, but defining that balance and that integration and
And I think
recognizing.
that's where, sorry to interrupt,
No,
but
please do.
that's where the concept of seva that we have here, which is selfless service, which is, I think it is something that we really need to embody, because I feel a lot of the time, even if we are, say, quote unquote, helping the world, it does come from a place of ego and material desire. Now, the concept of seva is in terms of as an offering to spirit, as a way to purify our ego. And I think that is definitely something I think that can help all of us as humanity to really anchor in and find that balance, in terms of how do we help the planet, but stay connected to the right place.
Absolutely. And it was that really resonates with me. It was like I was saying in my own spiritual practice, developing like offerings and for spirit and like asking that question every day. That has really been a big part of just my own internal work and activism in the external world. Like, what can I offer to people? What can I offer to the world? And, it's at the point where I'd be willing to offer my own life for spirit and for evolution and consciousness and like higher living. Like, and it's just because I don't want to say detached from my own, I guess, life. Because I like living. Like, there's a lot of good. Like, this is a great time. But like I recognize this is all very like we are infinite at our core. Like, there isn't a need for me to completely cling to this material existence as Evan McDermott. Like, I'm infinite and eternal anyways. So it's like what am I willing to offer? What am I willing to sacrifice for this, transcendence, for this higher way of living? Literally everything. Like, none of this actually matters in a sense. Like you were saying, it's all a hologram. It's like finding that balance, finding that integration. And it's like, okay, I'm okay with this. And I feel like for me, I'm at a point, and I feel like I can sense this within you too. Like, we're at a point where it's all okay. What happens. We'll live with it, and we'll go with the flow and continue to be ourselves freely. Like, we don't need to, like, the only freedom we lose is when we choose to sacrifice our sovereignty and sacrifice our spirit. Like, as long as we don't do that and we stay connected, we're always free. We're always free. There's nothing to fear.
And I think that's why it's so important, and something that I desperately need to work on within myself is building that resilience, building that warrior energy across all dimensions: mental strength, physical strength, emotional strength, spiritual strength, where, we can really show up and we are not so deeply affected by, what other people are saying, or we do not allow these things that we become the masters of our own reality, and really like allow ourselves to enter into our full potential.
Yeah, absolutely. Step fully into our inner power, embody the warrior. Because I've definitely had that journey of like, how do I become the warrior? Like, how do I fully? And it's what a journey, what a life this is. And I think this is the trip. This is the trip. This is the trip. This is the spiritual experience. It's what we're here for. And I feel like if we weren't ready to fully step into our power, fully like become aligned as a humanity, none of this would actually be available at the collective level. None of this darkness would be manifesting in the way that it is if it wasn't ready to be felt and healed and actually transmuted into a higher way of living. I truly, like, we're seeing it because it's ready to be felt and healed. And if I can heal it within myself, all right, everybody is capable of that. So can we do it? Maybe. I don't want to project a story onto it, but I think we're ready if we choose. And if we don't choose, well, the consequences of that will be felt. So, either way, I guess we'll see what happens, right?
Yeah. It's kind of interesting that we're at such a crucial point of time where, we are being given the choice. Do we continue going down this route of clearly there is an agenda behind what's going on. Do we go down this route of becoming dependent on pharmaceuticals? We are selling ourselves to their system. At the root of it, it comes down to like you said, mentioning our sovereignty to the system versus us being like, there is a limit, there is a line that I will not cross. That that I will not just unquestioningly take up the narrative of what's happening and look at the thousands of people that are being silenced and actually try and understand the truth, try and understand multiple perspectives. And we know that there are $1 billion agendas to control us. So understanding that controller and the independence paradigm, and how can we align more with the independence both within ourselves and in the outside world. And so, like you said, like no one really knows what the future is gonna be and how it's gonna play out. But we have a choice, and I think that's why all these organizations that are helping people become aware of their human rights, of making people aware that you have an independence, you have an independent mind, and we have something called free will, which is God-given. That the ultimate spiritual truth is that we are sovereign beings. We are divine beings in and of ourselves. And so there is no, right or wrong, and everyone's path in life is different. Everyone has to go through different things. But for the people that are kind of tuned into this idea that we do create our own reality, I think this is also a massive window of opportunity for us to really examine what kind of future do we want? What do we want to create now?
Absolutely. And then having the courage to actually, one, ask for that, like from spirit, like being tuned in, connected, because we can manifest whatever it is that we truly want, desire. So having the courage to ask for that and then step into it fully, and allowing it to become don't allow yourself to release the detachments to the old world, because if we are still attached to it, we can't surrender to the new world fully. And and it's quite the process. And I myself, it's not like I'm sitting over here completely detached and completely released all of my dependencies. There's still blind spots. There's still areas I need to work on. But
yeah, me too. I'm going through a lot of, understanding, also just new things opening up within myself. Where am I holding on to just patterns that don't serve me? This old world within myself that needs to crumble.
Yeah.
For us to really embody this this consciousness of liberation,
right.
that we deserve the best. We deserve abundance, we deserve joy, and we deserve to speak our truth, we deserve the freedom to do what we want.
Absolutely.
Coming from a place of self discovery and self introspection.
Right. And as we continue on, I feel more liberated now than I ever have. But I also said that a month ago. So, it's a month from now, I'm going to look back and be like, wow, I can't believe I was missing X, Y, and Z, when in reality, there was a whole nother dimension to it. And it's just a commitment to that path.
So true, man. Yeah. It's got to keep moving.
Exactly. So Kamya, we're at about an hour. I mean, this really flew by, and I'm feeling very empowered. I'm feeling very just ready to go and actually create this world. But
yes,
I want to do you have any final thoughts that you'd want to give listeners, or conclusion of this conversation, I suppose, but also where people can go to interact with you? I'm sure many of them may already follow you on social media, because you're such a powerful presence on there. And then if there's any other resources that you wanted to share, what the journey holds for you coming up.
Yeah, so my main page is Wandering Kamya on Instagram, so people can follow that page and stay connected with my story and my journey and the things that I want to build. I also have a Psychedelic Society India to create awareness of entheogenic plant medicines within the Indian space, and always looking to connect with people and understanding. I'm going to be rebranding it to Entheogenic Society. So if anyone wants to connect over that, we have an Instagram page, Psychedelic Sock India, and also can be accessed from my main page. In the future, what's coming up, I'm building community online, a place where people can really come and dive into some of these things, and where I can connect the new age with the old age, especially with my ancient culture, and finding authentic resources and materials that can help guide people along their journey and connect back to the origins of traditions, and also a reciprocity back to the land. So that is a project that is up and coming. And I always love to connect and collaborate with people who want to do this work, who want to revive our ancient wisdom, who want to revive our consciousness on the planet. And I think that's why we're here. We're here to do this, and like full in, 100% in. And I'm sure that we will manage to take back our freedoms. We will find a way through whatever's happening.
Absolutely. 100%. I agree with you. All in. And it sounds like a beautiful resource for people to engage with. And, so everybody who's listening, definitely go follow her on social media. So when that comes out, when that resource is created online, it's right there, click it. And, I'll put all of your social media and everything in the episode notes. So it's all right there. But, awesome. I'm feeling empowered. I'm ready to go, Kamya. This is the time. So, but
I think one final reflection that I have is that during this time, I feel that it's easy for us to go into feel disempowered. To feel that we're not doing enough, or that the things that are happening around us, and feeling isolated. But I think it's really encouraging that we have this community of people who align with people in terms of thoughts, that are working towards the same things. And the more that we focus on the positive aspects of forming those connections, what changes we want to make, I think it's going to be a lot easier than struggling and trying to fight and resist.
Absolutely. Bringing in that empowerment. And I've met a lot of people who sort of are asking why all this is going on, and what there's that dreary feeling, but that self-empowerment, coming together, that's the most important thing. Finding that community and that people, because we aren't. It's so cliche to say we're all in this together, and they use that in the material world realm too, when they branded the whole pandemic. We're all in this together. Both sides of it. We are actually so we can create this reality. But truly a beautiful time. And Kamya, I want to thank you so much for actually coming on the podcast and having this conversation, because I feel there's so much that I've gained from it, and it's been
me too. This was such a beautiful conversation, and it just helps you to also just realign with things like the soul mission, the soul path. So thanks so much for having me on.
No, absolutely. And I would love to do it again in the near future, see how things are shaping out in the future now, whatever the world is looking like. So definitely have to plan on it again. Awesome. Sure. Awesome. Thanks all the listeners for tuning in. And we'll see you all next time.